In this week's episode, we're going to be discussing what some people like to call pretty weeds. Yes, pollinators. We're going to be discussing how to plant it and some of the benefits it has for wildlife.
Mossy Oak Properties. We're outdoorsmen. Find their favorite place.
Pretty weeds.
Pretty weeds.
I like that. I think oftentimes when we hear the word weeds, it carries a negative connotation, or we associate it with something that we don't want. But this is a pretty patch of weeds, and arguably pound for pound, this pollinator patch could be the most beneficial habitat type that you can have on your property, because we are benefiting the smallest of insects that we probably can't even see. All the way up to our game animals like white-tailed deer and turkeys and songbirds and everything else in between.
I have to admit, when we started getting into the pollinators, species and the benefits of it, I was a little hesitant. It's not manly. What will people say? Flowers, what? But I'm telling you what, the more I'm involved in this pollinator stuff, the more excited I get about it. I mean, we're sitting here and there's native bees, there's bugs. I mean, if you were a turkey poult, we talked about fawns, we talked about turkey poults, other species that we didn't discuss like quail and stuff. Talking about brooding habitat here.
Right.
There's some herbaceous plants. It's good fawning cover. It's good brooding habitat. Bare soil, maneuverability throughout, that forest concept. You know, and I'm talking about security, bugs, food, protein. This is a win. And more importantly, the species that are kind of struggling, the bees and butterflies.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, it benefits white-tailed deer too as well.
It does, unfortunately, sometimes.
It's great fawning cover, which is a win, but in your pollinator patch, many times I know you've complained about the deer nipping your butterfly weed. They eat black-eyed Susans. There's tons of protein this time of year in the woods, and we wish they would stay out of this actually, so the flowers could flower and we could realize their benefits and their beauty that way. But as you mentioned, our native insects, butterflies and bees especially, our pollinators are in decline across a lot of the country, and this little patch, it's not very big, but it is its own ecosystem.
Oh, without doubt.
And without this ecosystem, there are so many insects in here that you and I don't even know the names of, or couldn't even begin to identify. But our more popular butterflies like monarchs, swallowtails that we see flying around that we can connect with, our native bees like bumblebees. Honeybees is not a native bee, but it's an important pollinator for the United States. I think every third bite that we take, or every third meal, is a result of the work of our pollinators and our bees. So you take this off the landscape, out of the equation, then those insects suffer, and as a result, up the food chain, I mean, indirectly we do as well.
Yeah, it's funny, somebody said, they asked me, have you noticed that there's less bugs on your windshield? Right. And I said, actually, yeah, there's bugs, but not like growing up.
Yeah.
And that is the cause of it. Your old field type habitat, the pollinators and all that stuff, are native insects are kind of disappearing off the landscape.
Absolutely. And think of your lightning bugs. I remember when I was a kid, stepping out, there are fewer lightning bugs today. You and I were just talking about that. And last night we were out near this area and just lightning bugs were just firing off like firecrackers, and it was just beautiful to look at. But as pretty as these pollinator patches are, we do want to emphasize and drive a point home that they're difficult to establish, and they take, more than anything, patience.
Patience, can't emphasize that enough.
Right, you can plant them, but it's not as easy to plant or establish as a food plot. Food plots, relatively speaking, are easy to plant and establish. You can prepare the seed bed, you sow your crop, it rains, and it's going to grow for you. These plots, they take time and patience and effort, and there's a saying with them that goes, the first year it sleeps. You'll plant your pollinators, in the first year it will look like you think that either the birds ate all the seed, or it washed away, or it was a total failure because there's just nothing coming up. The second year it creeps, and you'll see Shasta daisies pop up, or black-eyed Susans. You'll see signs of life scattered throughout, and then the third year it leaps, and it's an explosion of all this vegetation and cover and life. So first year it sleeps, second year it creeps, third year it leaps. It is a multi-year process and investment that takes patience to establish.
That would be probably the number one killer of a pollinator when being attempted, is the lack of patience, without a doubt. Right. And then again, let's talk about the house.
Yeah.
And food plots, as Cody mentioned, is easy. This plot here that we're sitting in, I mean, this is, I think, the 3rd year of it, and it's at that 3rd year step, like you were saying, you know, it pops. All you really have to do is just like a food plot, prep this, you know, get kill the bad weeds,
right?
The non-venomous, you know, kill those weeds.
Yep.
And then, you know, what I decided to do, because there's several ways to plant a pollinator plot in a traditional, you know, broadcasting, and we'll talk about that briefly, and then a no-till drill that's specifically able to plant fluffy seed, which is, you know, the pollinator seed. All we did here was just sprayed it with glyphosate, okay, killed all the weeds, and we just took a rototiller and tilled the spot. And then since it's fluffy seed, when you have a hand seeder, you're gonna have to put some, like I put cat litter in there.
Yeah.
That way the seed can disperse out.
Right.
It has something to grab a hold of and get it out. We broadcasted it, and then we just rolled it or cold-packed it. I took my yard roller, of all things.
Right.
Rolled it, compacted, get that good soil, and next thing you know, look at this.
Yeah.
Now, it is absolutely, as we mentioned, it's absolutely incredible. Bare soil, we talked about all that. But this is a plateau-resistant pollinator spot. I haven't had to use that herbicide. And luckily I haven't, because it's an expensive herbicide. But eventually, because of the bare soil and all the noxious weeds from afar that's not on my property, thistle will be blown in.
Yeah.
You know, trees, you know, seeds and stuff from birds will be filling in those spots. So eventually I will have to, but through chemical and fire, as of right now, this is a really good spot.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there are a couple of different planting methods that we can make use of to establish a pollinator patch. As you just described your method, also a no-till drill is an effective way. Obviously, you don't have to have one yourself. You can outsource that work. Somebody who has that planting method to drill the seed directly into. You can fall seed as well. The main takeaway, if you're going to broadcast, if you're not going to use a no-till drill, as you mentioned, it's really light and fluffy seed. You'll take up a big burlap sack bag that you get from the feed store, and it may be the size of a 50-pound bag of rye or, you know, equivalent of seed, but it's light. There's really light and fluffy seed. So if you're going to broadcast, use a seed carrier. As you mentioned, people have used fertilizer. You could use cat litter, cracked corn, whatever you can put in your broadcaster to evenly distribute and help carry that seed out of the broadcaster. But a no-till drill works equally as well. You would probably spray the site before with glyphosate to prepare a clean site, a clean seed bed, and then you're drilling that seed directly in to the soil, and it's going to establish itself really quickly because of minimal soil disturbance and good seed to soil contact. Yeah,
and what if you don't have the drill? You mentioned that. There's plenty of places, depending on where you live in the country, what state, like in Ohio, the Midwest, we have soil and water conservation districts.
Right.
A lot of counties do have a no-till drill that's able to plant fluffy seed. Your state agencies might have a no-till drill that you might be able to rent out or borrow. Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever. You know, organizations that deals with upland type of communities. Think outside the box when searching for those. And then all this stuff that the able to plant, there's a lot of information out there. Those soil and waters, Pheasants Forever, those people, those biologists are completely, I mean, they're just insane smart when it comes to planting an ecosystem like a pollinator patch.
Right, that's a really good point. Before you attack this project, it would be wise to enlist a mentor, somebody who has done it before and is successful at it, a biologist, whoever can help you guide you through this process, because as we mentioned, it takes patience, it takes proper timing of management like mowing or burning or herbicide applications. Specific herbicides can be applied to these plants, but it's not a cookie cutter process like planting a food plot. There are steps to it that need to be taken intentionally and mindfully, but the work is well worth it. I mean, wildlife aside, which is why this plot is here aesthetically, more than anything, it's just beautiful to look at. It's a great way to introduce kids to the outdoors, is to you know, to take my niece or nephew, or if you got kids, you know, have them help plant wildflowers, pick flowers for mom or your wife or your girlfriend, or you can point out bugs and butterflies, and it's a great way to get kids or someone unfamiliar with our lifestyle to connect with nature. It's a good vehicle to get non-hunters involved in getting their hands dirty in wildlife management.
Yeah. And the elephant in the room with this stuff, though, is the cost of it. It can be. Now, this mix, this planting here, it's a little bit of money. It's like $20-something a pound for this stuff. So that way, we talked about planting method. Make sure you do your homework that way. All that money that's being spent can be benefited.
Right, isn't wasted.
Yeah, it's not a waste of money. But I'm telling you, when you put that aside, when that stuff is established, when you see all the flowers, all the benefits, all the bugs, all the bees, all the butterflies, and other species utilizing it, you will find yourself, your yard will start shrinking. Because I'm telling you, I'm not lying, your yard, you'll start planning for other spots, because it is the manliest man or woman loves this stuff. I'm telling you, you can't not fall in love with it and the benefits of it for sure.
Absolutely, and it really broadens your horizon as a landowner and a land manager, because up until this point we've talked about chainsaw work that you can do and fire and food plots, and this is really an extension of your land management journey that not a lot of people can hang their hat on. Because it is time consuming or it is costly, but once you get your hands dirty and get some experience, it opens your mind to so many new possibilities in the natural world. 5 years ago, I couldn't have identified any of the plants in this spot or any of the bees, and now there's lanceleaf coreopsis, Shasta daisies.
Dropping some names.
Philadelphia fleabane, bergamot that hasn't flowered yet. Gosh, black-eyed Susans. I mean, the list goes on, and the more, for me anyway, the more I learn, the more I want to learn. And I learn all these flowers, and then I want to know the next flower. And then I see that little bee flying around right there, and I wonder, what can I do to benefit that bee? So it's an evolution of your land and wildlife management journey. And obviously a side benefit is it's just beautiful to look at while it's benefiting all of our wildlife species.
I love what you said there. That is so great, because especially the learning thing. Both of us. Now, I can't retain anything anymore, but you're dropping, like, we knew none of this stuff.
No.
None of this stuff. And nobody expects any of you to know this stuff, but there are people that are knowledgeable, that are willing and able to help you. There's grant money, there's cost share money, there's rolling your property in a government program like CRP or whatever. There are ways to help combat all the obstacles on achieving this, for sure. But we talked about diversity. This is definitely a diverse ecosystem that you should incorporate in your management plan. I know in the consulting world, I sneak it in all over to every plan. There's like, hey, how about a pollinator spot? So definitely worth looking into.
Absolutely. As we mentioned in the beginning, pound for pound, I don't know of a more beneficial habitat type, at least in this part of the United States, that benefits more wildlife species than a pollinator planting, because we've got, 20 different plant species in here. 3 times as many insects, and then all the animals in between are songbirds, bluebirds, turkeys, quail, grouse. This is brooding habitat for grouse as well. Whitetail fawning cover. We wish the deer wouldn't eat it, but it is high protein, so we can't really blame them for doing so. Every animal in our native ecosystem, from our game animals down to our native insects, is benefiting from a patch like this. And it doesn't have to be big. This is a small spot, but if you do put this habitat type on your property, just know that you're leaving a positive impact for wildlife.
Mossy Oak Properties. We're outdoorsmen. Find their favorite place.